Life's too short to drive boring cars.
Hi there, my bright-eyed bushy-tailed Weisenheimers. Yeah, if you've been listening to the news lately, you've probably heard Hyundai is going through a whole series of problems. Challenges with millions of vehicles recalled because of engine issues. But sadly, engines aren't the only issue that Hyundai is experiencing lately. And I'm going to actually share a list of 6 major defect areas that Hyundai sadly is experiencing that may help you decide whether you're going to buy one or not. Let's get into it now. If you do a quick Google search for automotive recalls, you'll probably find one of the first things that will come up is Hyundai and Kia. Allegedly, close to 3 million vehicles now recalled due to catastrophic engine failure or the potential to experience that. So before we talk about engine issues, let's talk about number 1, and that's transmission failures or issues related to the 7-speed dual clutch transmission, particularly found in the 2016 Hyundai Tucson. Now, there's been many customers who have reported that dual clutch transmission doesn't allow the vehicle to continue driving from a stop. Sometimes there's a hesitation or an absolute reluctance to even move the vehicle along. Some people have reported extremely scary condition. Another customer from Burlington, Massachusetts reported, "This is completely unpredictable and scary as hell. I have lost confidence in this car and am totally unhappy. I have filed a complaint with the NHTSA." Enough said, but there's lots of customers that have experienced very similar issues, and that is the transmission doesn't actually move the vehicle when expected. As a matter of fact, there's been as many as 41,000 of these vehicles identified within the NHTSA recall list. Now, while there is a TSB bulletin and some instructions about reprogramming the control module, this doesn't take away from the effect that many customers have been scared poopless and have to shake their shorts out at the next stop. And allegedly there was a class action lawsuit filed to the tune of about 135,000 owners of 2016-17 Tucsons, Velostars, Sonatas, and Elantras, all equipped with its 7-speed dual clutch transmission. And the potential value of this lawsuit could be in that neighborhood of $11 to $22 million as a result of this failure. Now, the second point unfortunately has to do with airbags and crash detection and protection. And while that's always familiar territory with a lot of manufacturers, for example, Takata airbags were releasing dangerous shrapnel in the event of an incident or an accident, and those were installed in many vehicles, from BMWs and well beyond. But in this case, it's the crash detection that is identified as a problem since 2009 all the way up to 2018, where Hyundai finally realized that this is a serious problem that needs to be sorted and investigated. The sad reality is, allegedly many of these crash detection systems did not function in the event of an accident, resulting in a potential for serious injury or even worse. Now, the third issue is very worrisome, and especially so for the older generation, the 10-year-old vehicles. And sadly, it's really related to quality. Now, while Hyundai's made great efforts to try to improve the overall quality of their vehicles in recent years, sadly, they've gone through a lot of humps and bumps. I mean, think back to the Hyundai Pony and the Hyundai Excel back in the mid-80s when it hit North America. Those cars were ruthless. I had a car salesman buddy that used to tell me that Hyundai Ponies actually had lead piston rings, which really would explain why those things smoked after very, very short amount of mileage. Well, I think you and I both know no one's going to use lead piston rings. It was a bit of a joke, but the reality is those cars didn't hold up very well in the mid-80s. Now, while things have gotten certainly a lot better in the last few years, they still went through a lot of issues, and some of the quality control issues resulted in steering and suspension related problems. For example, many customers would report when they turn the steering wheel, you get clicking noises, click, 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 and it just didn't seem quite right. That was the most prominent issue, and the majority of the vehicles were around that 2011 Hyundai Sonata. The second to that was shakes, wobbles, and of course clicks, all complementing each other, which would suggest the front end's about to fall apart. And customers of Elantras would say they found the vehicles sort of pulling to one side randomly, and other customers of early Santa Fe's would say that they found the vehicle would sort of drift. It wouldn't follow a straight path. And now often when you hear of stories of a vehicle's drifting or pulling to one side, that's always a red flag. Suspension issues, loose bushings, misalignments, or other related issues. Now, allegedly there was about 100 complaints filed for customers who said that they would be driving along and that the steering would lock up in a fixed position. Almost, when you're pulling your key out and you're walking away from your vehicle, that was the sensation a lot of people experienced. There was also a small recall for power steering related issues, and just a general uneasy feel that the vehicle wasn't as connected to the road as you would like it to be. Sadly, that doesn't instill confidence, and a lot of customers really lost faith and confidence in the brand about 10 years ago. And the fourth one is kind of a gross one. It actually involves the electrical system. And yes, there's electrical issues with these vehicles. Some of it's electrical, some of it's gauges, some of it's lacking to start. There's a whole host of issues. But let's just take that from the top. One of the contributing factors has to do with the wiring is soy-based. And they're not the only ones using soy-based wiring. Of course, Hondas and Toyotas, Subarus are all using similar type of wiring. Instead of the plastic sheathing around the wire, they're using a soy-based material, which is very attractive to rodents. Mice, rats, rabbits, any of those types of rodents will chew away at the wiring. That, of course, then starts causing problems. Electrical systems start to short out, equipment stops working, you get flashing, flickering lights, sometimes intermittent issues, and at the end of the day, worst case, sometimes a car won't start or it will just shut off altogether, causing huge repair bills in trying to troubleshoot, trying to find and locate some of these issues. The worst part is, even if you get that wiring replaced, which is generally going to be on your dime, it's not typically covered under warranty, the sad part is they just restore it with a new version of the same type of soy-based wiring, and you're going to have the same problem over and over and over again, and that will never go away, costing you potentially hundreds if not thousands of dollars in a lifetime ownership of that vehicle, just trying to stay ahead of that issue. One thing I can say is, hey, maybe you can hit up the local dealer for a lifetime supply of mouse traps and rat poison. Maybe just a thought. But other issues. And a high frequency of vehicles that just won't start is another issue. Just random poor wiring installation. There's also cases where some of the wiring looms and harnesses run tightly across the engine, and when the engine flexes under acceleration, it tugs at the wiring harnesses, sometimes potentially pulling apart connections and causing intermittent faults. And many other electrical related issues are associated with gauges and instrumentation, where sometimes they stop working. There's been cases where people have reported running out of gas because their gas gauge wasn't accurate or just stopped working. Because of the soy-based wiring leading to these instruments, some of it was just the instruments themselves. Nonetheless, the electrics have been a consistent related underlying problem for a lot of Hyundais. The Santa Fe comes to mind as one specifically with a high likeliness of problems. Now, number 5 has to do with the overall build quality of the vehicle. Now, while that's been an ongoing improvement process here for Hyundai and Kia over the years, sadly, there's still been a lot of problems. Let's talk about the exterior to start with. You know, several years ago with door handles coming apart, mirrors falling off, door trim not holding up very well, you're having to screw it back on or glue it on because pieces are falling off. A lot of buttons and switches just don't feel well put together and sometimes just feel like they're about to break or fall off altogether. As well as the self-healing paint has been noted as an issue on the outside of the vehicle where it starts to peel off in large clumps. That was supposed to be a self-healing clear coat, but clearly it wasn't entirely healing itself and it was coming apart in mass amounts. Now, there are many customers that tried to fight it and say, you know, I had a scratch on my car, and they tried to run this up through a lawsuit. Allegedly, it was shut down in court because it seemed like a lot of customers were just trying to chase all nickel and dime repairs. But in reality, the peeling paint wasn't something that was a normal effect. Obviously, scratches, that's a part of wear and tear and normal operation of a vehicle in many cases. Clumps of paint peeling off certainly isn't. And either way, it was still very disappointing for many, many Hyundai owners. Now, back in 1999, Hyundai made a concerted effort to try to improve the overall general quality of their vehicles. Sadly, they're still not quite there. Up to 9%, that's almost 1 out of 10 customers have complained about quality-related issues, exterior, interior problems, and the vast majority have been reported by Sonata owners. You want some examples? The fuel sensor, I mentioned already, or the fuel gauge not working at all. How about faulty sun visors that start to get loose and flop down or break off? Cracks on the dashboard, implying cheapness, broken seat panels, and sometimes the radio and the cruise control just stops working. Now, the vast majority of these vehicles are Sonata as well as the Santa Fe's, but not exclusively, because there's also been reports of Elantras, Genesis, Tucson's, and the Veracruz as well in smaller numbers. There's also been alleged issues with the anchor pretensioner and the poor design quality of those. Overall, it just implies that the interior and exterior quality isn't quite where customers would hope it would be. With that said, Hyundai and Kia have been making great strides in recent years to work on those very issues to try to make the vehicle better each and every year. Now, the 6th issue is the big one. It's the one that we've all heard about so much, and where do I begin? Let's just start with the 1.8 1.8-liter NU engine. These engines were often supported by a 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty, but sadly many engines made it and some didn't. Often piston slap noise, ticking, and even a rod knock associated with these engines in many cases. Now often it was the cold start that really made a lot of noise, but as the vehicle started to warm up, the noise would sometimes start to dissipate. And a common vehicle you'll find these in is a 2011 to 2016 Hyundai Elantra. Sadly, there's been so many cases of customers who have followed the right maintenance regime, have taken care of the car, and yet have found their engines either catastrophically failing or progressively deteriorating. There is also oil sludge issues, which unfortunately Hyundai allegedly as well, sometimes in some cases, blame the customer for lack of maintenance. Either way, it's a sad story. And then comes the Theta 2 engines, which is the 2 or the 2.4-liter GDI engines. And these were known for massive oil consumption, knocking, and as well engine fires, which sadly you've heard many stories of people having to depart from their vehicle while they watched it burn to the ground on the side of the road. Sadly, there's been others that have perished in this, and it has also contributed to many other fires, allegedly causing a lot of pain and heartache for many, many customers. In 2015, a huge recall was issued to potentially deal with these vehicles, and an extended warranty was added on to give the 10-year and 120,000-mile support. Now, some people say, hey, how would Hyundai support an engine that long if it wasn't a good engine? Well, that's the reality. They had to. They had no choice. They had to do something to cover their butts. The reality is it still wasn't a very good engine, in my opinion. Well, how did that all happen? Well, apparently during the manufacturing process and the machining that goes in to create the crankshaft, which is the base part of the reciprocating mass, during this machining process, there was metallic burrs emitted, and some of those burrs wound up in oiling orifices, which then reduced the amount of oil flow to potentially surfaces that would otherwise require lubrication. This then generated additional heat and would then contribute to very accelerated deterioration, heat, and in some cases fires. And did you hear recently there was a whistleblower from the inside who said that they even knew about this issue all along? And Hyundai allegedly denied it and pushed back on the recall all along. Now sadly, the original recall only covered 2011 and 2012 models with the Theta 2 engine, but then realistically up to 2014 was potentially impacted as well. So then there was apparently an alleged lawsuit for owners driving vehicles like the Optima, Sorento, and Sportage with those specific engines. Then, of course, there's been other issues, somewhat unrelated, where vehicles, for example, like a Santa Fe would just stall upon driving along, losing power steering, power brakes, everything, just go blank. Whether it was directly related to an engine failure or electrics, it was a problem. In addition, have you heard recently the news reported straight out of Hyundai where they're talking about trying to now fast track the EV production? They're trying to quickly develop an EV and start to push their ICE engines, internal combustion engines, to the side and make them sort of disappear, if you will. Do you think it's related to a lot of these problems and hopefully sweep them away and under? I don't know. Just a thought. But they're trying to move to the electric vehicles and put this thing in the rearview mirror, so to speak, so they can put it all behind them and forget all about it. Sad part is there's hundreds of thousands and potentially millions of customers out there that can't forget it. They've been impacted by these vehicles in a negative way. While there's been many happy customers, sadly there's been many that have been dramatically put out by these particular cars. Now I will say that Hyundai and Kia have made some great changes and some great advancements in the overall quality of their cars. Sadly, they're not quite there yet, and they still got a little bit of work to do. And with all of that said, be sure to click on that video. You're going to love it. That's 5 of the worst engines available on the market today. Hope to see you real soon. Catch you on the flip side. Bye-bye.